Alrighty, we are back, and last week I presented to you a technical breakdown offering you the keys to victory for either Terence Crawford or Errol Spence. And I have to say, the comment section, you guys were not messing around. Opinions are polarizing. You have those with common sense, understanding that we have two undefeated fighters with no particular signs of weaknesses, both durable, in their prime, and I think for most of us looking at that fight objectively, we would agree it's a pick'em fight. Sure, one fighter could completely demolish the other, but I think most of us agreed we didn't have enough data to prove that to be the case. But on the flip side, my channel always ends up attracting the die-hard fans of not the sport, but a fighter, where I'm finding that most who offer their opinion on Errol Spence, it's usually fairly balanced. However, fans of Terence Crawford mention the work he does for the black community, the notion that Bob Arum was racist towards him, and that he's essentially going to smoke Errol Spence. And that's cool, but what does the former have to do with the fight? What it does is suggest that you are a fanboy basing your opinions on emotions, and therefore you cannot be trusted. At the end of the day, we are just spectators. Let's try and collect some data and hear from some professional boxers their personal experiences fighting both Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. We begin with Danny Garcia, who has a professional record of 37 wins and 3 losses. He lost to Errol Spence via unanimous decision, but many of you might not be aware he also fought Terence Crawford twice in the amateurs. Let's hear what Danny Garcia has to say.
He's a great fighter. Everything looks easy from the outside, but I feel it was a great competitive fight, to be honest. You know, we on the punch stats, we both landed the same amount of power punches. The difference in the fight was just the jabs, and that was it. But other than that, I felt like it was a great competitive fight and back and forth action. 2 champions going at it, and you know, the result was the result. Yeah, when he did the Ugas, that was crazy because he kind of punished him. I didn't think he was going to do that like that. You know, he basically beat him every round, beat him down every round, and that's just to show you, you know, he's a great champion. You can't take none away from him. We fought twice in the amateurs, but it was 1-1. I felt like I won both. But you know, that's a great matchup. Like I said before, I feel like Spence is the bigger welterweight. He's the bigger, stronger guy. He throws a lot of punches. He's stronger. He's physically stronger. And then I feel like Crawford's I would say he was probably the more talented guy, you know, probably more skill. And it's going to be interesting to see how Spence fights another southpaw like him. You know, I feel like Spence's one of his big advantages is him being the big guy, being southpaw with a big jab. So he's never fought a southpaw, you know, the skill level like Crawford, even though he's right-handed, but for most of his fights, he fought southpaw. So I just feel like this fight's going to come down to whoever wakes up or whoever feels better on that day. Whoever believes in himself more that day, that's who's going to win, because both guys are mentally strong, both guys are skilled, and I feel like whoever wants it more and feels better that day is going to win. Spence is strong. He's a strong puncher, but Crawford throws the shorter punches. So it's going to be interesting because, you know, Spence is busy, and then Crawford's probably going to be picking his spots and trying to get in his rhythm. I can see it depends who gets off on the better, you know, ahead. If Crawford gets ahead, starts controlling the fight with a jab and backing Crawford up, then I can see Spence winning. But if Spence goes in there, if Crawford goes in there and finds a rhythm, then it might be a W for Crawford.
Danny Garcia refers to Errol Spence's strength not once but multiple times, but he also alludes to the intelligence of Terence Crawford. Now, Garcia is a prideful man. He of course has painted the image of the fight as close. However, to the best of my knowledge, after roughly round 4 or round 5, Errol Spence did to Danny Garcia what he does to everyone. Garcia also believes that not only did he beat Terence Crawford once in the amateurs, but he felt he should have got the nod for both fights. But his conclusion isn't far off from the bulk of our conclusions. He thinks the best man that shows up on the night gets the win. And I'm assuming that he believes Errol Spence takes it through pressure fighting and that Crawford perhaps wins it by setting traps. We move on to Kell Brook, who has a record of 40 wins and 3 losses. He lost to Errol Spence in 2017 via KO, and he also lost to Terence Crawford in 2020 via TKO. Here's Brook's take on Crawford versus Spence.
I think after seeing their fight, Porter and Crawford, I think you've got to lean towards Crawford now, you know, but styles make fights, obviously. Spence is a natural southpaw, you know. It'll still be very interesting. Everyone is still tuning in, but I think just with the way he dealt with Porter, I think you have to start leaning towards Crawford, just because of Spence's car crashes. He had a problem with his retina in his eyes. I think you have to start leaning towards Crawford when you're in that fight.
And at this point, the interviewer asks Brook who was the most powerful.
I'd say Spence, yeah. suspense.
So this is a great take specifically regarding Errol Spence's durability, because Brook himself was never the same after Triple G fractured his right orbital bone. And then Errol Spence went on to fracture his left orbital bone. And when he eventually fought Crawford, it was a short night. So he's suggesting, based on durability and of course based on Crawford's more recent performance against Porter, that Crawford has the edge. However, now we have two fighters who have fought both men, but both of them are leaning towards Errol Spence when it comes to power, which, let's be real, this is heavily debated amongst us, the spectators. But how can we argue against two men who have been in the ring with them? Maybe they're being prideful, or there's a bias involved. If you think so, let me know in the comment sections. We move on, and I've saved the best till last. One of my favorite boxers offering tactical breakdowns, Shawn Porter, who has a record of 31 wins, 4 losses. His last loss was to Terence Crawford in round 10 via TKO, and Porter's egotistical dad throwing in the towel, and 2 fights before that he lost to Errol Spence via a split decision. Let's hear Porter's take on who wins between Crawford and Errol Spence.
This is what I thought I needed to beat Errol. I thought I needed everything to beat Errol. I analyzed him for myself, and I knew that years before we fought. I said it's gonna take everything to beat him. I boxed, I used speed, I used foot movement. I thought that I needed everything. And in the fight, I was like, somebody gotta get knocked down. I was like, I gotta get him. Somebody gotta get knocked down in order for there to be a winner. I felt like it was going to a draw. And he gets the knockdown. If there's one thing you need to beat Errol, you gotta hurt him, you gotta put him down. You're not just fighting against skill and talent and conditioning, and you fighting against pride. Yeah. I felt like with Terence, I was outboxing him until what happened ended up happening.
Right.
And the one regret that I have against Terence was that I didn't mix it up. That I didn't do more than one thing. I knew I had to do everything against Errol. I think mentally I knew I had to do everything against Terence. I think I didn't know exactly when those points were gonna show up. And then he never really gave me a tell. He never really showed me that I needed to change it up, you know what I mean? And so I stuck with what I had until it started to backfire. But the same thing you gotta do against Errol is the same thing you gotta do against Terence. You have to hurt Terence. If you don't hurt Terence and you don't put him down and hope that the referee wave it off, he's getting up. I could see this being a situation where Errol is trying to come after him, and then he says, you know what? Let me outbox you and let me try to box with you, you know, instead of trying to run into the fire, you know, or walking into the fire, you know? And even with me, I never let him feel the fire.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's cool to outbox somebody, it's cool to win rounds. Exactly, it's cool.
Yeah.
But when that fire comes, I never let him feel the fire.
Right,
you know what I mean? I never gave him a reason to get outside of himself. And that was something I've always prided myself on, was making people uncomfortable. I never made Terence uncomfortable. You gotta make Terence uncomfortable.
And that's why I kept this one till last, because I think this is the best breakdown of them all. Even when Porter was an active fighter, he wasn't afraid to speak truth, even though to some eyes it might make him appear weak. He was honest going into both fights with Spence and Crawford that these were uphill battles. So when he offers to us that he didn't quite have the right mindset going into the Crawford fight, I believe him. And if you pay attention to his performance, specifically the later rounds where he appeared frustrated and was lunging forward, throwing hooks, falling right into Crawford's hands, he seemed off that night. However, he acknowledges that this may have just been down to Crawford's strong mental game. Perhaps he was frustrated because Crawford made him frustrated. On the flip side, he alludes to going into the Spence fight confident, at his best. However, even when offering his best, Spence was just a few steps ahead, and Spence of course widened that gap with the knockdown in round 11. Either way, Porter feels that the keys to victory for both men being at the top of their game is to do damage. And I agree. I think someone needs to widen the gap early and maintain that lead throughout the match. And tell me if I'm wrong, but is that not essentially Errol Spence's entire game? I mean, Danny Garcia said it himself, what Spence did to Ugas, and we're talking after his car crash, which Kell Brook also referenced. What started out as an even fight, Spence broke Ugas down, and a man who had previously only lost via decision loses to Errol Spence by TKO. And this was Spence's last fight. But then again, Ugas is not Terence Crawford, and every offensive combination from Spence leaves him open to Crawford's counters. It's a fascinating matchup. As I said previously, I'm leaning towards Errol Spence. However, I honestly think it's a pick'em fight, and may the best man win. If you guys enjoyed technical breakdowns, don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and let me know in the comment sections who you think wins this match, and what you think of Garcia, Brook, and Porter's analysis. Do you think there was bias involved, or do you think they built that camaraderie with their past foes to where they've just kept it 100? But anywho, have a great weekend, guys, and I'll see you live on the night of the fight. Take care, peace.